All right. Welcome, my friends, to the next episode of the Red Delta Project podcast and live feed Q&A, where we are simplifying diet and exercise by taking a fundamental approach to fitness to give you more power, control, and freedom over your healthy lifestyle. It's always a match cheerfully, and today's episode is sponsored by my brand new book that just came out this past week. This is my 9th book in the RDP series, and actually the 3rd in the Grind Style Calisthenics sub-series, which is Suspension Calisthenics. How to use a simple suspension trainer just like a weight machine that fits into your pocket. We're going to be talking a lot more about how suspension calisthenics can help you build the body you want with bodyweight training and how it fits into the whole grind style system. But the link down below for that new book on how to use those suspension trainers to the best of their ability is down below, both in paperback and Kindle form. Go ahead and check that out. And of course, ask me any questions you may have as well. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming on in. Let's jump right on in. So this is a topic I explored a little bit in a video previously this week, but it really deserves a lot more deep dive. This is one of the cruxes of our short attention span culture now. Everybody wants the answers they need in order to achieve what they want in like sound bites, like 15-second TikTok videos. But the fact of the matter is, when we're talking about real good results, like I want to really make some serious changes, it's not going to happen by making little tweaks or weird tricks that you're going to find on TikTok or even short YouTube videos. It deserves understanding things on a much deeper level. So that's why I like these podcasts. And that's what we're going to talk about today is the 4 disciplines of grind style calisthenics and how they all integrate to give you the best chance of building the muscle and strength you want from body weight training. Now, why do I incorporate all of these? It's simple. I've never been a big fan of relying on any one single discipline for anything in life. Even like in the martial arts, people are like, okay, what kind of martial art do you do? It's like, well, primarily karate and taekwondo. But then you also, if you're like, I want to know how to really defend myself, you also integrate other things like jiu-jitsu and wrestling and boxing, or even just Filipino stick fighting. Like if I've got a pool cue, how can I use that well? Whenever we talk about integrating a diverse approach in anything in life, we typically have more benefit and less downsides. Investing in a diverse portfolio, a diverse diet, diversity in our workouts. Diversity is a very good thing. But at the same time, we got to make sure we don't just have any random thing, because we want to make sure we're selecting things with a particular purpose. And the 4 disciplines of grind style calisthenics all serve a particular use, purpose, and function, rather than just saying, okay, just throw everything into the kettle and hope it all works out. Because if you ever had that experience when you go into the gym, you're like, dude, there's so many different ways I can work my chest. It can quickly lead to a very bloated workout where you've got a lot of stuff there, and it just kind of is mess. It's a lot of fluff, all filler, no killer, in other words. So let's get into a couple of questions right off the bat, if we can get to things. We've got Federico. It's good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. Always following your tips. Love it. Changed my life. I'm very happy to hear that, very much so. Thank you very much. This is a question I should address right off the bat from Frank. What book of yours would you recommend buying first? This is actually something I need to address on the webpage, because boy, when you write 9 books, and I've got number 10, 11, and maybe even 12 in the works right now, it can be like, where do I go first? Well, it depends on what you want. Generally, I always recommend the initial grind style calisthenics book to start off with, especially if you're like, I just want to build some muscle and strength. What's the best way to do that? Grind style calisthenics, full stop. The other books that I'm writing now are supplements to that guide. Overcoming Isometrics is one. Suspension Calisthenics adds to that. The next one, which is Progressive and Weighted Calisthenics, that's going to add to it too. If you're looking for more of an encyclopedic approach to bodyweight training, of just give me a ton of tools to use, Smart Bodyweight Training is the way to do that. And if you're looking for more of a just general fitness, how fitness really works, that's Fitness Independence. And then the other ones are pretty obvious, like bodyweight training for cycling, bodyweight training for martial arts, if you want to learn how to do those sorts of things. That title's pretty self-obvious right there. So let's get into it. The 4 disciplines of grind style calisthenics are, and these are the logos on my shirt. This is the official grind style calisthenics shirt you can get through my merch store at Spring. And we have Let's see if I can get my coordination right. We've got progressive calisthenics, suspension calisthenics, weighted calisthenics, and overcoming isometrics. So you may look at those, and it really kind of depends on how you perceive bodyweight training too. Like I used to make videos where I had a video one time on how to work your upper back with bodyweight training. And I was doing like rear flies on rings. And people are like, that's not bodyweight training. You're using equipment. It's like, oh God, is it bodyweight training? Is it not bodyweight training? Some people don't consider weighted calisthenics bodyweight training. They're like, that's weightlifting kind of thing. For right now, time out. Screw the boxes, all right? We don't want to be dogmatic about things. And I'll get into this a little bit later. But the reason why I call these the 4 disciplines is because each one of them has special qualities that can help you build your body more effectively. And they each also can help to kind of counteract any weaknesses the other ones have. So let's jump right into discipline number 1. All right, we have, backwards here on the screen, we have progressive calisthenics. Progressive calisthenics is the most bare bones, fundamental approach to bodyweight training we've got. Think convict conditioning, right? This is where it's you, a pull-up bar, floor, wall, and maybe a couple little tools and stuff like towels or basketball or something like that, yoga block. The reason why this is one of the most base level approaches is because we are learning how to use your body better. Full stop. Your success in your workouts depends almost entirely on how well you can use your own muscles. If you don't use your muscles very well, almost nothing you do will ever work. There's no way. When I got into bodyweight training via convict conditioning with progressive calisthenics, that's the first time in my life when I actually would get down on the floor. I'm like, all right, let me think about how I'm using my chest, how I'm improving my technique. What's my range of motion? I didn't just grab a heavy weight and lift it and assume that my muscles knew what they were supposed to do, which was my big mistake. It was, I have to actually move with intent and concentration. And that's what progressive calisthenics requires. It not only requires more strength and muscle work capacity, but also more mobility and stability and coordination and a lot of these other athletic qualities that are essential for your ability to use your body on a higher level. So that's why progressive calisthenics is our first level. That's the most minimalist approach. You almost need no equipment. You need skill. You need to improve everything there is to do that can hold you back, because you can have all the work capacity in the world, but if your mobility sucks and your stability sucks and your coordination's in the toilet, your ability to build the body and performance you want is real low. So that's why progressive calisthenics, which adjusts the resistance and difficulty on the muscles through progressive technique, is so very important, because it can highlight weaknesses that are holding you back and force you to level up how well you're using your body. Plus, from an independent standpoint, you could do it anywhere. You almost need nothing as far as equipment goes, and the workouts are super efficient as well. So that's progressive calisthenics, discipline number 1. Let's see if we can get to some questions here. Frederico is asking, hey Matt, what would you recommend to increase your range of motion? Simple. Remember the most basic fundamental principle. You gain that which you challenge. So we want to use exercises that challenge your range of motion. Deep squats, back bridging, hanging from a pull-up bar or overhead pressing. The exercises that challenge your range are the ones that are going to improve your range. One of my favorite ones that I've been implementing as a warm-up before my Taekwondo class is I get into a nice, deep, wide squat. Think like horse stance, or we call them sitting stances, really wide, and I shift my hips back and forth, and I'm twisting my hips. Basically, I'm just using as much range as I can in my hips during the squats. So when we're trying to improve range, try to use exercises with a good amount of range. When you hit that limit and you're like, okay, that's a little bit of a stretch, like in your back when you're hanging from a pull-up bar, good. Now you can start to subtly work that point in that range of motion, like those shifting squats. I'm not just stretching, I'm working the muscles in that end range. And that gives them that, quote, muscle confidence that they can handle that range, and your nervous system takes off those brakes that are kind of holding you back. So you want bigger range? Use bigger range. All right, Dave is asking, of the 4 bodyweight disciplines, how has your own preference evolved over the years? Oh, this is a real good question. I know the answer to some of this, but curious in the whole training career. Oh, it's evolved quite a bit over the years. Generally, the secondary discipline, which I'll talk about a little bit more of, weighted calisthenics, was one of my most preferred ones initially. But over time, it's become more about progressive calisthenics. I would say initially, progressive calisthenics was actually pretty low on the list. So I started into bodyweight training with a lot of weighted stuff and a lot of suspension stuff. And now it's much more about the progressive bodyweight training. I feel like I'm going more towards the types of approaches that Paul Wade recommended in convict conditioning, even though I didn't use that particular approach and methods for quite a while initially. So that we covered discipline number one, progressive calisthenics, where you adjust the difficulty of how hard your muscles are working by the challenge of the technique. Now, the benefit to that is that you need to develop those other athletic qualities I mentioned earlier. You need to improve mobility and stability and coordination and so on to access higher levels of resistance. The downside of progressive calisthenics is you need to improve stability and mobility and coordination in order to access that level of resistance. So that's why a lot of people can get stuck in the ability to adequately work their muscles with a purely progressive calisthenics approach, because they don't know they need to work on those things, or they don't know how to improve those things. And they basically, their neuromuscular proficiency stays locked, and therefore the potential stays limited as well. And then that's why you have people all over the place saying progressive calisthenics doesn't work. It's not improving anything, yada, yada. It's like, no, you're just getting held back by other qualities. But, excuse me, what if you're like, I just want to freaking work my muscles really hard? That's where weighted calisthenics comes in, because weighted calisthenics means that you can adjust the resistance against your muscles with basic fundamental techniques by adding weight to the body, or sometimes even subtracting it. Like we have a pull-up and dip machine at the gym that assists you. So I usually consider that like weighted calisthenics as well. So instead of adding weight, you're taking it away from your body. And so now you don't have to worry about improving technique. You don't need to worry about improving those other athletic qualities. You can adjust the resistance right off the bat with just adjusting how heavy your body is. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can do this, but I primarily recommend either just a simple weight vest, like the Kensui weight vests I always use, which are plate loaded. Basically, it turns your body into a barbell. You can use a simple dip belt. I use my iso loop as a dip belt for pull-ups and dips, because really at the end of the day, you can load extra weight on any exercise, but you're probably only going to need 3 or 4 exercises that you would load. It's not going to be like loading everything. So typically weighted pull-ups and dips will cover the upper body, and then weighted lower body stuff like dumbbell lunges and stuff will cover you just fine. Now, the advantage is you don't need to develop other functional qualities and improve your technique. The disadvantage is you don't have to develop other functional qualities, improve your technique. So that's why even though you're doing weighted calisthenics, you don't want the weight to be the goal. The goal is still to work the muscle adequately enough. So the way I always think about it mentally is if you're doing pull-ups a certain way, and you're like, okay, time for weighted pull-ups, and you slap on a 30-pound weight vest, that weight vest isn't going to make you stronger. I tell this to clients all the time. I hold up a plate and I'm like, this weight isn't going to make you stronger. It does nothing for your muscles. It doesn't tell your muscles to do anything at all. Remember, the signals that depend on telling your muscles to get bigger and stronger and faster, and everything comes from your brain. That's what's actually telling your muscles to do. So when you add weight to your body and you're doing your technique, you're essentially saying, can you do the technique as well as you did it before, but now with the added challenge of the extra weight? Same range of motion, same number of repetitions, same technique. Are your elbows flaring out? Are your shoulders retracted? It does not behoove you to be like, great, I just did pull-ups with 30 extra pounds. I'm like, yeah, but your technique was terrible and your muscle activation was horrible and it's all in your elbows. And it's like, yeah, but I'm lifting 30 extra pounds. Big flipping deal. Weight doesn't make you stronger. The amount of tension and how you're using your muscles makes you stronger. If you compromise those things for the sake of adding more weight to a technique, you are going backwards, my friends. So that's the liability of weighted calisthenics. But if you recognize that and you go in the other direction of still trying to use your muscles better and training them adequately, now you can use weighted calisthenics for your benefit, and combining it with progressive calisthenics, and they create this nice synergistic approach where you have all the advantages and none of the disadvantages of either of those two. Let's get to some other questions here. Christopher is asking, what are your thoughts of military style calisthenics workouts? Very good conditioning. I love watching videos of guys working out like the Navy SEALs and stuff like that. I remember a video Zach Evanesh posted years ago of Navy SEAls on dip bars, and the instructor was like, down, up, down, and they would only move when he told them to and stuff. Very cool. But at the end of the day, it's still calisthenics. It's very good. And remember too, one of the points of military style training is not to get you stronger physically, but mentally and emotionally. You had a friend one time, he brought home a book, and he's like, oh, I'm going to use this to get in shape. And it was like the Navy SEALs approach to fitness or whatever like that. And I told him, military boot camp is actually one of the worst fitness programs you could possibly ever enter. And he's like, what? How is that? I'm like, the whole point of boot camp and BUDS training and stuff in the Navy is to get people to quit. They're looking for the best of the best of the best. They're there to break you. And most people cannot do that kind of training and come out the other side, which if our successful application of training is we want to get people in shape, that's the opposite what you want. It's terrible training for most people because they're going to quit. If a program causes you to quit, it's a bad program, but that's not the point of that type of training in the military. The point is to weed out the 99% of the people who can't do it and get to the best of the best of the best who become then the elite fighting forces. That's the point of that training. It's not to make people stronger. It's to weed out the other people. So yes, by all means, you experiment with stuff like that, but we have to kind of keep things in a perspective of what's really being done here. All right, so we've got our first two disciplines. We've got progressive calisthenics, technique focused and athletic, but it can be harder to access higher levels of resistance sometimes. We got weighted calisthenics, much easier to access the weights or the resistance you need, but it's not nearly as technique based. Okay, but you combine the two to some degree and they become much more holistic. Now we've got suspension calisthenics. And suspension calisthenics has always been something I've been obsessed with, more just the design of the equipment, of course. And the reason for suspension calisthenics there is it greatly expands upon the exercise and resistance repertoire of regular bodyweight training. So if you're like, okay, I got a pull-up bar, I got the floor, and I got the wall. Well, we got all sorts of progressive techniques, but how much can you really change things around as far as body position when you've basically got the floor and a place to hang? But when we have the rings or the suspension straps that we can use, now we got a whole world of possibilities, both in how much you adjust resistance and in the exercise selections you have. Basically, as I talk about in my book, is suspension straps are essentially a weight machine in your pocket. Whatever you would use an old classic like universal machine for, then you can basically mimic those same exact exercises on a simple set of suspension straps. Chest flies, bicep curls, tricep extensions, ab work, ab focus work, hamstring curls, leg extensions. I mean, all this sort of thing you would use bodybuilding machines for muscle isolation, or when you're trying to adjust the resistance of things like push-ups. Like, well, I got push-ups on my knees and I got push-ups on my toes. It's a big, big step potentially between the two. But you can angle your body with the suspension straps, and that gives you a lot more control over exactly how much resistance you have. And that's why I love using the suspension straps, is it expands the repertoire of what we're doing. And if we're honest, what we're doing here is trying basically bodybuilding. So we have access to all those bodybuilding exercises, shoulder work, bicep curls, like I mentioned before, trying to hit the lats and everything. So that gives us all that ability to be like, what did you do in the gym? Now here's how you can do it with bodyweight training, because that's what I wanted to do when I got into bodyweight training. I was like, I don't care about the fancy stuff. I don't care about the acrobatics. I don't care if I never do a muscle up in my life. Doesn't even register on my radar. I just want to take whatever I was using in the gym on machines and basic free weight exercises to build up my body. And I want to do the exact same thing to my muscles with bodyweight training. I don't want it to be any different. If I woke up one day and I was like, oh, my biceps feel a certain way, And I said, well, was that from body weight or weight machines? I'm like, I don't know. I can't tell. It's the same thing. That's what suspension calisthenics gives you, is the ability to keep the body weight training on a level playing field with all those machines and stuff. And then when you combine all three of those together, so you got progressive calisthenics and progressive suspension calisthenics, like archer push-ups and stuff, now you've got a whole big bag of tricks. And then even weighted suspension training, like weighted push-ups, like push-ups with a weight vest, do it on a suspension setup. And that's a real big difference right there. That is a very different animal. So by combining all three, you've got this huge repertoire of activities and exercises that you can do. All of the so-called limitations that people assume is present with bodyweight training just completely fall by the wayside when you have all three. But you're still very much about efficiency. It doesn't require much in the way of equipment, doesn't require a whole lot of different exercises and long drawn out workouts. It's just each one is bringing a little bit of something to the table so that they all synergistically create a much more holistic system of grind style calisthenics. All right, so that's the first three, and then I'll get to the fourth one here in a second. Sean is saying, love suspension training. I have more trainers than any one man should have. I know the feeling, Sean. I just ordered 3 of them myself. When I use rings in public, it always gets people attention and questions in a good way. I know what you mean. It's a good thing. I go to the playground sometimes with a couple trainers, and they're like, oh, what are you doing? That's so crazy. It's easy to get lost in our own world of like, doesn't everybody know about this? Doesn't everybody understand how this works? And the answer is no. A lot of people don't know that you can have a weight machine in your backyard with just a simple setup that you can even build yourself. That's the other thing I included in my suspension calisthenics book is my latest DIY suspension setup, which the basic level of it is only built out of 3 parts, 1 length of rope and 2 PVC handles. That's it. That's all you need for a very basic suspension setup that works very, very well. So you look at something like that and it's like, dude, it cost me less than $10. It fits in my pocket, but it's a weight machine. Fantastic. Next question. Hey, Matt, have you tried modern periodization, as in having accumulation phase of adding sets over the weeks until you can't recover fast enough anymore and having a deload? Not a whole lot. Generally, I try to just work as however I can, but I'm not a big fan of the mindset of more work. Can I do more work? Because typically the ability to achieve a good result won't come from more work. It comes from achieving an objective in your workouts. So that's why I don't tell people work this much, do this much work. It's like if you were going to run a marathon, you're like, well, how long should I run for? I'm like, I don't know, just run until you get the job done. If you could do it in 3 hours, great. If it takes you 6, do it in 6. I don't like giving people a set amount of work to do because honestly, I have no idea how much work you should be doing to achieve the objective of your workouts. Grind style calisthenics is about those objectives. In the tension phase, it's about waking up your muscles and getting them to engage. Stability phase is all about mobility and getting a very strong footing under your hands and feet. Strength phase is about high intensity, low rep training. And you just do that for however much you can until it starts to taper off. And then with hypertrophy, it's just burn out the muscle. So you could do that in 2 sets. You could do it in 8 sets. Slip of the tongue there. But it's one of those things of I don't want to tell people how much they should work because chances are it's going to be wrong. If I say do this amount of work or this many sets or this type of plan, I'm probably going to be wrong most of the time. Instead, base it on the objective you're trying to achieve. And if you need to do more work, do more work. If you don't, you don't. And generally what that also means is that you're not going to overdo anything and require that deload week. Dave asked, hey, Matt, what are the pros and cons of each of the 4 styles for martial arts? Oh, this is good. So weighted calisthenics is great for strength, but it's usually not the best for explosiveness. Like, yeah, a lot of people they do weighted muscle ups and weighted clapping push-ups and stuff like that, but I generally don't recommend that sort of thing. But the thing is, it's good for strength, but usually not power. And I've seen this a lot and experienced it myself, where if you don't have any sort of power component, you do tend to get a little slower in martial arts training. Like I used to be a hell of a jumper, and I haven't done a whole lot of jumping lately. So now I'm like, and jump, up, boom. And I'm like, what? I got like 2 inches off the ground. Like, what the hell? right? So generally, like progressive calisthenics includes explosive stuff. If you're doing push-ups and then you do them hard enough that you can come off the ground, that's a progression in technique. That's progressive calisthenics. So that way you're developing that power. So that's the first thing I would look at. When it comes to stability is huge in the martial arts. So you're getting that again with progressive technique, calisthenics as well. Suspension training, typically if you came to me and you're like, I'm a martial artist, like, yeah, suspension training can be a good way to work some things in, but I wouldn't recommend focusing too much on that because you're typically not going to be a better martial artist because you can do more bicep curls. It's typically more of how well you can control your body, because the better you control your body, the better you can control your opponent's body. Okay? But we're about to get into the fourth discipline, which has probably got the most carryover to the martial arts. And that's not technically calisthenics, of course, but who cares? Which, of course, is overcoming isometrics. I have it here. The logo is just the two arrows coming together because overcoming isometrics is always about meeting resistance with force. It's where you're using an iso trainer or iso chain, and the more you pull on it, the more it pulls back and so on. So that's force against force. And the reason why I included overcoming isometrics is because, as I said before, your ability to effectively get a good workout and training session in depends on how well you can use your muscles. Full stop. It's not your program. It's not your sets and reps. I don't care how many push-ups you can do. I don't care how far you can run. If you do not improve how well you can use your muscles, you're not going very far ever. But once you improve your ability to use those muscles, anything you do will work better. Literally, you could have the crappiest workout program in the world, and it will still be more effective if you can have better control over your muscles. And the best way, by far, to improve your muscular control is overcoming isometrics. Yes, you can do it with any other strength training program. So you will do it with any type of training, but it's going to run into a limitation a lot faster. Overcoming isometrics is basically like a neuromuscular hack. It gets you out of whatever you're used to using your muscles for and gets things to wake up and overcome a lot of those weaknesses that are holding you back. That's why we use overcoming isometrics in the tension phase of grind style calisthenics. You use that as your warm-up. One, it feels great. Two, it helps the entire workout be a lot more effective and a lot safer and a lot more satisfying. And finally, it's also a really good way to shore up weaknesses. Like if you're having trouble engaging your lats and your pull-ups are always going to be pretty bad. They're always going to fail to build up your back to any large degree. You're always going to have issues in the elbows. You're always going to have some sort of hang up, and it's like, oh, it's all in the biceps. Hardly feel it in the back at all. Unless you get those lats engaged and more stable in the shoulders, nothing you do in your workout program is going to be that effective. But the second you can get those lats to fire up better with some simple isometrics, any type of pulling exercises you do are going to be a hell of a lot more effective. So that's why that's the fourth discipline of grind style calisthenics, is overcoming isometrics. And that's why I'm also writing the books I am right now, because I wrote Grind Style Calisthenics, which covers all of them to some degree piecemeal. And then I'm specializing each one. Overcoming Isometrics book is just out now, came out last year, and that focuses on the overcoming isometrics. Suspension calisthenics just barely came out. And then, of course, the next one is going to be on the progressive and weighted calisthenics. And that's going to be in one book, because I don't need to make a whole nother book on just weighted calisthenics. It's probably not enough content to really justify a whole book. So I'm just going to combine them into two and cover both of those disciplines in one book. That way, the whole Grind Style Calisthenics series will just be 4 books, and you'll get a much more broad, in-depth approach to all of the disciplines, and the GSC book will show you how to combine it all together. And you can mix and match and do whatever you want with these disciplines. This is the great thing about them, is they all include fundamental movement patterns. They all work the body in the same general motions. Even isometrics is fundamental movement pattern based. You're just not moving. So you can mix, match, switch, and swap any type of discipline you want throughout the program. If you're doing pressing movements, for example, you want to build up your chest, you can do it with progressive calisthenics, you can do it with weighted calisthenics, you can do it with suspension calisthenics, and you can do it with overcoming isometrics. All of them can work on an equal level for that objective. So you have the freedom to just do whatever the hell feels best for you, whatever you like. You could be all about weighted push-ups, right? And then after a while, you're like getting into the progressive push-ups. And then after a while, you're into doing a triple set of your chest flies, tricep extensions, and then push-ups afterwards. Lots of options, folks. That's what it's all about. When we get stuck into dogmatic boxes, you limit yourself ultimately. It's nothing about like this is the purest approach or whether it's primal or paleo or anything like that. Who cares about that stuff? I'm all about giving you freedom and options to train in the way that's best for you. And that way you don't stay stuck behind someone else's recommendation. All right, let's see what other questions we can address here. Hey, Matt, what do you think of HIIT training? Usually one all-out set per exercise, 5-second eccentric, 3-second. Well, HIIT depends on so many different things. You ask 20 people what HIIT is, and you're going to get 20 different definitions. So that's why I'm glad you clarified here, because when I thought you asked about HIIT training, I thought you were talking about something completely different. Here's the thing, is I don't usually care one way or the other what kind of training you do. Your ability to get the result you want does not depend on your training style. I don't care if you're working your chest with either of the 4 methods or bands or machines or free weights, doesn't really matter. Your results don't depend on your workout program or style of training. They depend on the fundamental progression of muscle tension. So it depends on your goal. Like, what do you want to get out of it? What are you trying to do? And that's always where we start off with. What do you want your muscles to be able to do? If you want to get stronger, you need to make your muscles contract harder. That's it. If you can get your muscles to contract harder, they will get stronger and be able to produce more force. I don't care how you do that. In all honesty, it doesn't matter how you do that. You should base your decision on how you do that off of your preferences, your resources, and just your goals in general. Like, well, someone said that the best way to do that is to do this exercise or HIIT training or whatever. Who cares? Does not matter. Do you want to do that? First and foremost, there's a billion gajillion ways to condition your body. Forcing yourself to do any type of diet and exercise program you don't want to do is a complete waste of time, unless your goal is to do that diet or exercise program. Because there's so many ways you can do it. Why pick the thing you don't like doing? And it can literally be that subjective. Like, I just don't like doing this. I just don't like the way this thing feels. Great, that's enough reason not to do it. Kick it to the curb. Or it could be the other way. Like, dude, I love the way this feels. I love the way this type of training makes me feel. Are you putting more tension in the muscle? Yeah. Okay, then go for it. Great. Awesome. That's what you want to base your decisions off of. Because you can bring up all that, well, this type of training, the science and research says blah, 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 blah. Who cares? All we need to do is ask, what are the muscles getting asked to do on the fundamental level? How much tension are they creating? How much time is there? What is my body able to do? You gain that which you challenge functionally. What do you functionally want your muscles to be able to do? And then use whatever training style you like to do that. But it also makes it apparent on whether or not that does it. Like, is doing a push-up really slow going to make it contract any harder? Not really. No. Why would it? There's no more resistance. There's no more tension in it. It's the same. So will it make you stronger? No. Why? Because there's just no more tension. There's no more tension on my chest if I go slow at the bottom or if I'm going at a nominal speed at the bottom. The tension is the same. So there's no more resistance or no more need to be strong. So there's your answer. It doesn't help me with that, so I don't need to do it. Jen Zim, good to see you, my friend. Matt, still struggling with isometrics. I got tendon issues, firing the muscles somewhat, but the tendons over the joints takes most of the brunt. Now using straps drop the bulwarker. Good call, my friend. Here's the thing is, typically when we have tendon issues, joint issues, what that means is the muscle somewhere isn't doing its job. Your body and your joints especially are incredibly resilient, and they should be able to handle a ton of stress and be perfectly fine, notwithstanding any sort of injuries or issues. Like if you've got arthritis in your hands or something, then yeah, that's something that needs to be addressed. But generally, joint issues should just not exist if your joint itself is healthy. But when we have joint pain, it means something in the chain is not doing its job. Now, the bulwarker is a fun piece of kit to work with, but a lot of those exercises are very single joint, isolated type movements. So when we do a lot of those sorts of activities, we typically create a very fragmented approach to how we're using our muscles. Like, okay, I work my biceps and I got my shoulders and then I got my traps and stuff. It's like, yeah, but in order for the joints to be strong and healthy, we need all of it working together and as a cohesive synergistic unit. And it's really hard to develop that in those types of styles where we're not training the muscles to work together, but instead fragmenting it up. So when using the straps, what I would do if I were you, Genzam, is nothing single joint. Don't try to isolate anything for the next month to 6 weeks or so. Push, pull, squat, flexion, extension, lateral. That's it. Only the compound stuff. That's all you're trying to do. And you're trying to link up all the muscles in those chains. So when you're pulling, forearms, back, biceps, shoulders, traps, everything. You want to include everything. When you're pressing, you want to have every pushing muscle working. You want to feel ultimately like you're not like, oh, it's all in this one area or it's all in this other area. You want to feel like the entire chain is one solid unit, one muscle group. Don't isolate, integrate, because the more you integrate stuff, the more the stress is going to go through your joints rather than into them. That's what I would do. So I think you're on the right track. I think that's a good way to go about it. Michael Stokes asking, is there much point doing push-ups if I already do a good amount of dips? Oh, that's an awesome question. I know you always say dips are basically suspended push-ups. Yeah, exactly. And I would say, yeah, just if nothing else for variety's sake. And whenever we're changing things like angles and stuff, it can give us a little bit of an insight into how we're using our muscles outside of just one scenario. So one of the things I'm always telling people is that if you're using a tension chain, like your push chain, you should largely feel that chain working in the same way, regardless of the exercise you do. So if you get down and you're like push-ups, and then I got suspended push-ups, and then I got dumbbell bench press, and then I got barbell bench press, all of those should feel roughly the same. Yeah, of course, there's going to be some little differences here and there. This happens a lot with pull-ups, where people like will do pull-ups and they'll change their grip or they'll change their width a little bit, and they're like, whoa, it feels totally different. Oh my gosh. That's not a good thing, my friend. That means you're not using your muscles correctly somewhere. Ideally, when you change your grip, the pull-up shouldn't feel that different. Again, it'll feel a little different, of course, here and there, but that difference should be smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller over time. That's why when you're using the 4 disciplines of grind-style calisthenics, you should be able to switch and swap all of these disciplines out, and your muscles are basically still doing the same thing no matter what. So when you're doing dips, those are suspended push-ups essentially. So when you go to push-ups, it shouldn't feel that different. It should feel almost exactly the same. So it's a good comparison to be like, okay, when I do dips, it's all in the chest. When I do these push-ups, it's all in the shoulders. Okay, I'm doing something wrong. Something's going on. I need to figure that out. Look at your shoulders, look at your packing and stuff, because then you can use the exercises to learn how you're doing things differently. And usually when we're doing something differently, it means we're not addressing something in one exercise that needs to be addressed. And also just sometimes it's fun to just mix things up. Sometimes you like chocolate ice cream. Sometimes you like vanilla. Sometimes you like a swirl. It's good to have options for these sorts of things. Oh, excuse me here. Dreamer asking, hey Matt, how effective are isometric exercises like wall sit, for example, for building muscles? So again, it comes down to not what the method is, but what you're asking the muscles to do. So generally, when we're trying to build up our muscles, we want to expand upon the muscular work capacity. How much tension is there and how long is that tension there for? In other words, you're just making the muscles work collectively harder, because fundamentally muscles have only those 2 things. How much tension are they holding? How long is the tension there for? So if we want to stimulate hypertrophy right now, as we have a limited understanding of how to do that, because we don't know. We're still in the weeds of how exactly do we make muscle grow with exercise? We're still kind of like, we're not exactly sure why that happens. But one of the things we can confidently say is if we just make the muscle work harder with hard sets, that's probably as good as we've got right now for a recommendation. So can you do that with isometrics? Oh, hell yeah. Can you do it without it? Oh, sure. Absolutely. So what you want to make sure you're doing is make sure that with isometrics, you're working progressively harder over time. This is one of the challenges that people have with it. But in many ways, isometrics is one of the easiest ways to do that. because you're not limited to the level of resistance you have. So you can have a timer, let's say you're holding for about 30 seconds, and you can just keep progressively pushing into the wall as hard as you possibly can with those wall sits. Do not just hold yourself. The purpose of overcoming isometrics is not to do the exercise. It's to make the muscle work progressively harder. So get to that point where you're like, okay, this is how hard my quads are working, harder than that. I always tell my clients, a little joke is, I want you to tense your muscles as hard as you possibly can. And then I want you to tense them even harder than that, because that's what's required for a lot of this adaptation we're looking for, is to go to your limit and then say, okay, dig deep and make it happen even more. And I would keep the time relatively long because we're trying to burn out the muscle to some degree. It's kind of hard to do that when you're doing isometrics for like 10 seconds. So have a longer duration too of 20, 30 seconds. But I wouldn't be like, okay, I did it for 30 seconds last week. Now I do it for 40 seconds. Typically, the time duration is going to be about the same, and it's the tension that's going to increase. Simply Calisthenics, good to see you again. Hey, Matt, is dips and push-ups enough for the delts, and are rows and pull-ups enough for the biceps? Yeah, definitely. So for the delts, though, I mean, you want the whole shooting match. You want to make sure your delts are working with those rowing exercises, too. You want to use the shoulders with everything. I mean, hell, you could be doing hamstring curls on the floor, still engage your shoulders for those because that's what you're rolling up on. So you want to have a little bit of tension in your traps and upper back, including your rear delts. So the key is always, if you want those muscles working, well, then engage them, work them, put them to use. The exercise does not work your muscles. The dip does not work your chest. You use your chest to do the dip. So the ability to engage and work a muscle depends on you and your concentration, not the exercise itself. So that in that regard, it's like, great, if I use this thing and everything that can use it, then it'll build up. Absolutely. That's entirely true. So yeah, it can be enough if you can engage it. And yes, it is enough for the biceps as well, because your elbow's bending. That's what your biceps do. So again, if it's like, it doesn't feel like it's enough, that's on you, not the exercise. Nothing wrong with throwing in some curls and some, Y-flies or something to hit the shoulders and the biceps a little more if you like, but it shouldn't be necessary. All right. Very long name here with a lot of X's and stuff. Boy, you would win at Scrabble if that's a real word. Hey, Matt, I train push-pull legs 5 days a week. A day would look like 300 pull-ups, 300 push-ups, 500 squats, and I alternate another day with dips, rows, lunges, also weighted sometimes. Is this effective? I don't know. No idea. No idea. Because remember, the effectiveness of something has nothing to do with your program. Has nothing. You could have said 5 pull-ups for all I know. Same sort of reference. Because the effectiveness does not depend on your program. It depends on how it's progressive from what you were doing before. That's what's important. So if I said, all right, I'm going to give you a job and it's going to pay you $3,000 a month, is that going to make you more money than before? I don't know. If you were making $5,000 before, no. If you're making $1,000 before, hell yes. It all depends on what you were doing before. It's that delta. That's why I called it the Red Delta Project. What's the delta? I don't care what your diet looks like. I don't care what your program looks like. You don't get the results from what you do. You get results from creating a delta in what you did do to what you are doing now. So you can get stronger by doing more of those push-ups. You can also get stronger by doing less of those push-ups, depending on why you're doing less of them. Maybe you're using more progressive technique. Maybe you're bigger range of motion, better tension control. There's a million ways that you can change it. So the question for you to ask yourself is, great, this is what I'm doing. Now, what's the next step higher? What am I going to progressively ask my muscles to do? Because that's what we want to focus on. The only other thing that I would have in there is always remember that in order for any program and stuff to be effective, you have to be able to stick to it. So you could come, like, that seems like quite a bit of volume. I don't know. I've seen people, they do 300 pull-ups as a warm-up. And other people like, great, I'll do 300 pull-ups, but it's going to take me all afternoon. So it could be on a big range. But if you're like, God, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, okay, then it's going to be a bad program. Because the first rule of any good program is you have to be able to stick to it with relative ease. All right. Pingvin, sorry, mispronounced. Would be interested to hear your opinion about this new trend. Ooh, trends. by doing squats with elevated heels by putting weight plates or squat ramp under your heels. Oh, that's been around for decades. I think there's a classic picture of Dave Draper doing a front squat with his heels up on a 2x4 from the 60s or the 50s or 60s from back in the day. I like doing heel elevated squats. That's why they make squat shoes that have like basically high heels for weightlifters that elevate things up. Because if you ever want to experience this, try doing like squats on a slightly inclined surface. We at the Bodyweight gym that I'm on, that I work out at, there's an ever so slight decline to the floor in one direction, just the way the concrete settled or something. It's very, very slight, but that's why I always tell people, oh, you're squatting, face that wall. Make sure you face that way so you're on a slight decline. I love it. It's a very good thing. It's usually very effective for helping people to get into a deeper squat, better mobility in the hips and the ankles and stuff like that. And yeah, I highly recommend it. But having heels elevated in squats is kind of like push-up handles. It might help in the short term, but it can be a crutch and it can hold you back if you're not addressing it. So, the things that you need it for, like you shouldn't need elevated heels in order to do those squats, just like you shouldn't need push-up handles in order to do push-ups. The more you become dependent on it, the more it shows that you're not addressing a weakness that's going to hold you back anyway. So I definitely like it, play around with it. Sometimes it's a good way for people to be like, oh, wow, this is what a deep squat feels like. Oh, this is what it feels like to go ass to grass. Good. Yeah, that's what you're working on. You should be able to get that without those. And then you can progress with lower heel lifts and raises and so on. And that way you can work with the improving technique that way. So yeah, it's a good teaching tool, I guess we could say. It's a good way to learn how things should feel without them and then try to work without them over time. Let's see if I missed any questions here. But getting back to the 4 disciplines of grind style calisthenics, again, a lot of people will be like, well, is suspension calisthenics real bodyweight training? Is weighted calisthenics real bodyweight training stuff? Don't get locked into these sorts of things. One of the more common questions I kind of come across these days is people like, are back squats weighted calisthenics, like weighted squats? To that, I say, why are we even asking this question? Because when we are asking, like, does it fit in this box? Like, is it a body weight exercise or is it a weighted calisthenics exercise? What we're oftentimes asking ourselves, or asking whoever we're asking, is what box does this exercise fit in? Because I've only regulated my training to this box or that box, or my diet to this box or that box, whatever label I put on it. And if it doesn't fit under that label, then I don't do it. If I said, no, it's a weightlifting technique, it's not calisthenics, they're like, okay, I don't do back squats. Or like, what weighted dips? Like, at what point is it a weightlifting technique if I'm lifting like 200 pounds with it? No, it's no longer a body weight. Okay, I won't do that. No. That's not the approach you want to do. That's ridiculous. We should not be basing our training and diet methods on what box we want to fit ourselves in. That's nothing more than a prison. Instead, you should be basing your decisions on what exercises you adopt and discard on your preferences, your resources, and your goals. So is back squats even something you enjoy doing? For me, personally, it was just never really, I never felt like I got much out of it. I always felt like it was just hard on the body, but not hard on the muscle for some reason. So that reason alone is good reason not to do it. It's like, it's just not my thing. Okay, great. Or do you even have the resources? I don't have a squat rack. I don't have a barbell. I don't have any of this stuff. Well, then you're not doing back squats, right? And is it in alignment with your goals, right? I want to be able to jump over this, and I want this explosive power and skipping and being able to sprint fast and stuff. Okay, but you don't have to do barbell back squats to make that stuff happen. So it always should depend on those 3 things. Does it fit your preferences, resources, and goals? And if it isn't in alignment with all 3 of those, forget it. Just discard it and be like, yeah, I don't need it. But if it is, then do it. And who cares if it doesn't fit in some sort of a box? It can, or it may not. Someone's like, that's not calisthenics training. That's not real weightlifting. It's like, who cares? It doesn't matter. You're not going to get results because you force yourself to fit into some sort of a box. Average Guy Fitness X What's your elbow injury? Oh, sorry, that's not for me. Again, folks, if you put a hey, Matt, I know that's for me, but I know I didn't say that earlier. Here we go with the GSC program. Karsten asks, are you going to make monthly workouts with micro workouts like you did with the GSC program? The Grind Style Calisthenics program is a monthly thing. Not really. I've got a ton of micro workouts in the micro workout playlist. So you can just, go for that playlist and just pick and choose as you like. I did the last 2, I think, years. Every year I do a daily workout of the day or exercise of the day during the month of December. It's an advent calendar sort of thing, right? So this is like day 2. This is the workout for today. So I've got a ton of micro workouts in that playlist. So you can just pick and choose as you like. But you do bring up a very good question and something I might want to consider. After years of telling myself I'd never do this, I actually started to do it recently, as I started an email newsletter, folks. You can go over to reddeltaproject.com and sign up for it. Call it the Delta Digest. And I hate email newsletters. I always hated writing them. They're always the same old bland, sales pitches, buy my crappy product, and like, oh, I went to the store and bought bread. By the way, buy my product. Like most of them are completely worthless, and they don't really have any real value. And that's one of the reasons I always wanted to stay away from them for a large degree. But I have run across some folks who do newsletters right, and I patterned it off of that. And so the Delta Digest is basically 3 points to be made every Friday of this is how you can train better, this is how you can eat better, and this is how you can live better. Eat, train, and thrive, as I call it. And it's just one simple actionable tip or takeaway every Friday that can help improve things over the next month. So maybe I'll include a monthly micro workout in the Train Better section sometime. That's a very good idea. I think I will start doing that. So sign up for the Red Delta Project Delta Digest. It's a free email newsletter. Thank you very much, Sean, for the donation as well. I sincerely appreciate that. Pizza money, yay! But that is a really good idea. I'm still hashing it out. But yeah, email newsletters they're such a pain in the neck for both the person writing them and the person reading them, which is why I've never really wanted to do them. But like I said, I've got a couple of newsletters, one from James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits. He has an amazing email newsletter. I always open it and read it. It's exactly like that. 3 points, you read it in like 10 seconds. Good takeaways and stuff, very good stuff. So it's one of those things that it can be done well. And I thank James for showing me how it can be done. Source Code is asking, hi from England. Good to see you from England. Standing shoulder press, barbell or dumbbells? I almost always prefer dumbbells. Dumbbells or kettlebells for several reasons is because the barbell, one, that's how I hurt my shoulder years ago, but also because a lot of people just do not have the ability to get the shoulders back far enough for support on that. Plus, when we have our retracted shoulders, as we want for shoulder stability, either we can't get our head back far enough to clear the bar, or the arms come forward, in which case the shoulders come forward and then we lose shoulder stability. It's just one of those things where you can do it with a barbell. I'm sure I'm going to get a million people with hate mail saying barbell shoulder press is perfectly fine and safe. Yes, as I was addressing last week, there's lots of exercises that are perfectly fine and safe with a big fat asterisk next to it, as long as you can do X, Y, and Z all the time. But a lot of people don't have that, or people lose it fairly quick. And I, for one, almost always use rotation whenever I'm pressing, and largely pulling too, to some degree, almost always. And you can't really rotate with a barbell, but you can with dumbbells and kettlebells. So I very rarely will give people a barbell to press overhead, but I'll do dumbbells all day long. I like ladder presses where you're kind of going up and down at the same time. That's kind of a fun little core challenge as well. It's just a lot easier for clients that I'm training to do it with hand weights versus a barbell. It's easier to set up. I don't need a rack. I don't need to adjust plates. I'm like, here, grab these dumbbells. Good. Start pressing. And it's so much easier. So there's a million reasons why I much prefer dumbbells and hand weights over the barbell for that reason. And it's very, very rare that you're going to find somebody who's like, oh, these dumbbells are too light. I can't adequately, put resistance against my shoulders. If it was like a deadlift or something, maybe, but it's almost never going to happen with the shoulders. So There's less and less reason to do it with a barbell, in other words. Let's see. Jen Zim, thank you very much. He says, Kindle account beefed up with suspension calisthenics. And remember, folks, if you do the Kindle version, the updates, because this is one of the great things about being an independent author, is that I can change my books anytime I want. Like a couple of years ago, I started to realize that the programming in grind style calisthenics was a little off. So I changed it. So if you have the electronic version and I make an update or I change something, like don't do it this way, do it that way kind of thing, then you get those updates automatically. That's one of the things I love about like ebooks and Kindle books and stuff, is that it will automatically update for you. So you'll always have the best version of those books. It's also a lot cheaper to do it that way too. In all honesty, like I offer the paperback version of my books just as a courtesy, because I know some people like having a physical book, but I like make 30 cents on each paperback. I make nothing on the paperback books. Amazon takes it all. So I just do it for those who want it. But if you buy, via Kindle, then I make actually enough money to pay rent. So just a little backstory there. Binary Surf, it's good to see you again. Hey, Matt, while trying to work out with progressive overload, is it good if I get delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS, after every workout? No, it's not necessary at all. Always remember this little takeaway. I forget who I learned this from, but I want to thank them if they're out there, is that you get sore from exposing your muscles to a novel stimulus. You get stronger by exposing them to an effective stimulus. And a lot of times we kind of base the effectiveness of something off of if we feel sore the next day. But that's not necessarily the case. It's kind of like, well, this food is very good for me. It's nutritious. How can you tell? Well, it tastes awesome. Like, great. I can put, black tar heroin on a hamburger and make it awesome, but that doesn't mean it's healthy. And delayed onset muscle soreness is kind of along the same lines. It doesn't really mean what we think it means. If you have soreness, doesn't mean it was effective. If you don't have soreness, doesn't mean it was ineffective. That's why we want to look at what are we doing to the muscle on a fundamental level. Was it working harder? Is it tensing up harder? Are you working it a little longer? Yeah, okay, great, it's effective. If you make such changes, will it be sore the next day? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But it's not a reliable thing we want to base things off of. That doesn't inherently mean that it's worthless, because if you are sore the next day, that does sometimes mean you expose the muscle to something new, which might be progressive. It might be like, wow, I haven't moved my muscles like that in a while. I haven't worked that hard in a while. Okay, that can be a sign you're on the right track. But the other thing to also consider, and this is what a lot of people don't like to hear, is that when we have that soreness, that damage to the muscle, there is some evidence and opinions out there of experts that you don't actually get to build your muscles to be stronger until you can train without that soreness. So I like the analogy of having a sports car. You call up the shop and you're like, I want to upgrade this sucker. I want to make it faster. And they're like, great, bring it on in. And on the way to the shop, you crash it. And you limp it into the shop and it's got dents and it's all damaged and stuff. And they're like, well, it's here, but all that money and resources you were going to put into upgrading it, we now need to put into fixing it to get it back to where it was. And so that's kind of how your muscles are working. When you're like, oh, I can't hardly walk today, my legs are completely destroyed. Yes, you have a lot of protein synthesis and you've got a lot of resources going towards building the muscle, but you're not building it above where it was. You're just fixing it. You're getting back to baseline. And so if you can theoretically work out and not go below baseline with a lot of damage, but you're still telling the muscle to get bigger, now it's got resources to actually improve itself. It's kind of the analogy I like to use with it. And of course, it's still in the works as far as does this really happen and stuff. But the bottom line is don't put too much credo into muscle soreness. Yes, it's a very satisfying thing. It does feel good. I like it as much as the next guy, but it really doesn't mean anything. And if anything, we almost want to avoid it. Mikey Teaspoon's asking, do I use weights? Yeah, I got some weight plates over there that I use on my weight vest. That's good. That Kensui weight vest is about the only weight vest I ever recommend because it's just so easy to swap things out. Robert Richard, I'm using micro workouts for 4 phases. Very good. Mobility, heavy, weight, low rep. Very good. All the 4 stages of grind style calisthenics. With weights works great. Did you ever plan on using that way? No, you can use it however you want. Remember, the 4 stages of grind style calisthenics are about the objectives of that stage. I don't care how you go about getting it. You could do it on machines, you could do it with free weights, you could do it with bands, you could lift small children. Again, the method isn't that important. The exercises you use are not that important. All the debate out there of like, what kind of style of training should I use and what kind of exercise should I do is largely a complete waste of time, because those things do not have the active ingredients that get you the results you want. If your muscles are working progressively harder, you're going to get what you want. I don't care how you go about doing that. That's what a fundamental approach to fitness teaches us. It's not the method that's important. If we get sucked into the method thinking, I'm going to get stronger because I'm using this kind of exercise or that kind of tool, then you're losing the point of what you're actually doing. So the point of grind style calisthenics is not to use calisthenics, is to focus on tension control, stability, strength, and then a finisher phase. And you can use whatever you want with those. Typically tension phase is going to be better off with overcoming isometrics, but you can use it, theoretically with just tensing up your muscles, or if you had a weight machine and you just pressed against the weight machine and held a certain position, focusing on it. As long as you get the objective done, that's all that really matters. And so if you want to swap out different methods, go for it. Like I said, you should do things largely because they fit your preferences. A lot of what makes exercise and diet work for someone is if they want to do it for intrinsic reasons. Like if I always tell people, like especially with diet, if you didn't have to worry at all about your weight, would you eat this way? And a lot of people say no. I'm like, well, then you shouldn't be eating that way. Like we can manage your weight 100 billion ways. There's no good reason to eat any particular way if you don't want to, because we can manage your weight with 100 million dietary approaches. Your preferences are such an amazingly powerful tool that can work for or against you in your ability to stick to any sort of approach. So if there's something you honestly don't like or want doing, then we should probably nix it. All right, let's see. I think that covers a lot of things here. I've been chatting your ear off for over an hour. Keep an eye on the Instagram channel, folks. Lately, I've been running into some schedule changes in my own life, and these Saturdays are getting a little bit more difficult to handle. It's always the highlight of my week to be able to do this for you, but lately it's been running into some schedule issues. So I always post on the Instagram channel the updates on when the next live feed's going to be and what the topic's going to be and stuff. And I'm thinking it might make a little bit more sense to do like a Friday afternoon sort of deal. And again, if you can't make it, like I always post the audio to these things to the Red Delta Project podcast on your podcast directory. So keep an eye on the Instagram channel if I'm going to be making any changes. I haven't really decided just yet, but it may be in the works. And if you have any real strong opinions on when I should be doing things, please do let me know, again, through the RDP Instagram channel as well. Oh, Wolfie Dragon coming on last bit. Good to see you, my friend. All right. So I will talk to you folks next week, either Friday or Saturday, depending on how things are going along. But again, the new book, Suspension Calisthenics, book 3 in the Grind Style Calisthenics series, and book 9 in the Red Delta Project library is out now. Link is down below. Please do check that out. And now I'm working on book 4 in the GSC program, and that'll complete the entire series. Hopefully I can get that out sometime this fall. So thank you very much for watching / listening. Appreciate all of your questions, and I will talk to you next time. Till then, be fit and live free.